Hey guys, welcome to Here in the lab today, we are building a breakaway brick wall, a fake breakaway brick wall. And this is gonna have to get used a bunch of times. It's not just gonna get used one time. So I'm not gonna run you through the whole mold making process. We've got lots of other videos and we will show you this again. We won't just stop there, but I made a mold. I built a box, glued a brick down inside there, and then poured 44 ounces of silicone on top of it and got a nice little open dump mold. This was my original brick. There's 3 holes in this brick, but the one that, I didn't want that. It would actually make the mold a lot harder to make, and so I just eliminated that by putting tape over it. These are gonna have mortar on these surfaces, so you won't know that that tape was ever there. When I first started pulling these, my test copies, because I needed to develop a process to figure out what we're gonna do here, I just poured flexible foam. This is a rubbery, spongy type of foam. I poured it into the mold and didn't have a back plate on it. And I just used red and brown pigment to try and get me close to this brick color. You can see that I did not succeed at all. The second problem is that you notice this different color in the front. And that's because these old bubbles, the first ones that expand as I pour this stuff in, they have a lot of time to expand. And with no back pressure on them, they're just allowed to grow and grow and grow. So if you feel this, it's actually a papery thin skin that is not tough at all. The rest of the foam is actually very tough. In fact, it's called Tough Stuff. It's a 4-pound flexible urethane foam available from Smooth On. Because of this color failure, I decided to come up with a different process. I've never done this before, but what I did was I got some dry concrete pigment and decided that I would, showing you this doesn't really help, does it? I tried dusting the inside of the mold and doing a cold cast in foam. Never done it before, but, well, it worked. All the interior surfaces of the mold are brushed with a dissolved wax release agent. It's one of our normal release agents. This is not a 1-to-1 mix formula, so it is 8 parts of A to 10 parts of B. So you do have to do some math, and a scale is involved to get all the measurements correct. I'm dropping in 2 drops of brown pigment and 2 drops of red. That's just sort of so that if some part of the surface tears at some point, you still have brick color on the inside. The interior of the mold is then brushed kind of aggressively with the pigment powder to get to stick to the release agent and the inside of the mold. And the back plate that adds our back pressure that we need, that is also brushed aggressively with pigment. This pigment is actually designed for coloring concrete. You mix it in with the concrete. It just happens to be a good dry pigment that bound well to the exterior surface. I actually picked up 2 different brick-colored pigments so that I could vary the color of the brick somewhat by either mixing them or alternating colors. Because this is an expanding product, you have to stiffen up the mold walls, at least on the long axis, with some exterior boards and some clamp, either a strap or in this case we're using rubber bands. Pot life on this stuff is 30 seconds. So learn how to stir very efficiently and quickly and get it into the mold. After 30 seconds, this stuff starts expanding pretty quickly. You can see it here. It's time to get the back plate on and put a weight on top of that. It's a physical pressure, it's not an aerodynamic pressure. So it's not that we need to supply an airtight seal. It's just that when the foam starts rising, it needs to have something to push against physically to keep the uniform bubble size throughout. It's gonna take about an hour for this thing to get hard enough for us to demold it, and we have to make 38 of them. After you finish your coffee, it's time for demold. This back plate twists off fairly easily. You just pull these rubber bands off and separate the mold. And again, be sort of careful with this because it's a flexible foam, and at this state, it is handleable, but it is not fully cured, and you can tear it. We're scrubbing these off with hand cleaner because there is some residual pigment on the outside that kind of gets all over your hands and stuff like that, and we want it to be fairly clean. Now, there is enough pigment embedded in the surface that we can do this, and it doesn't hurt the color at all. So now time for a quick trim, and then we mix up a little batch of acrylic matte medium and some of our pigment to make a paint, and use that to rub into those, where we cut those seam lines, and that fills it beautifully, and you can't tell it ever happened. And 2 weeks later, now that we've got all our bricks made, let's start building a wall. Now that we've made all our individual bricks, we're building them into a wall. And what we're doing is we're actually matching
in a regular, it's not a square. It's 30 inches across the bottom, 29 inches across the top, 42 inches tall on the left side, 31 inches tall on the right side, because bad masonry and earthquakes and cold springs. To make up the volume of our mortar, we're using EVA foam because it's flexible. Again, this is, I believe, L200.
One thing about any contact cement is that it is critical that both of the surfaces that are going to be bonded get glued. It's not like using super glue or wood glue where it can just squeeze out, because you basically want this to dry to the point where it's just tacky to the touch, but it is not wet. So I will not only butter this, but I'm also, we'll apply glue to this, but I'm gonna apply glue to this as well. Something else worth noting is that you'll notice that the sheen is going away, the wetness is going away. That's the sweet spot, is when the last of these little shiny bits disappears. That's the sweet spot, the moment when you want to actually bond the two pieces together. So we have to wait a couple of minutes. So I'm gonna match these two things up perfectly, because once they make contact, it bonds, which is why it's called contact cement. I'm splitting the difference between these two and using this block in the front to make sure that they are straight. Now this will attach to here, like so. My mortar actually hangs over a little bit right here, but that's fine. We can take this back over to the belt sander and just sand that down. Perfect. Right now, I've got to come up with a mortar system for this guy. You can see I've actually already figured it out. Let's get to work. Okay, so I'm actually going to tell you the product name on this. This is Dynaflex Ultra, and this is in light gray. I mentioned that because I've used a couple of different ones on this, and this one seems to work the best. So I'm just going to pipe this stuff in, and then we'll finger bang it a whole bunch and stuff. Now that I've finger smoothed everything out, it's too smooth. And by the way, this horrible looking mortar job that I've done, I'm no mason, but neither is the guy on location who did that job, so mine probably matches his pretty well. What I'm gonna do, you might be able to get away with using sand for this. What I'm using is called Urethil 3. It's a urethane filler resin. It's not in resin form right now. It's urethane that's granulated. It's powdered up, almost like sand. About the same texture, but it doesn't weigh anything. So that lack of mass and the fact that it'll grab really well in the silicone should help us out. I'm just patting it in to make sure that it binds with the silicone. It's one of the few times that you'll actually see us use non-catalyzed silicone, like the caulky kind. Another way you can refer to catalyzed silicone is an additive cure silicone. Don't know why I told you that. We let that dry. This will actually take like overnight to cure. And if we need to adjust the color from this point on, we can come back with a little wash or something like that. But I'll let them do that on site because they know what their exact mortar color is. One other thing to note is that I'm only able to do one face at a time. Because I'm using gravity to hold the powder on, I can do all of these horizontal surfaces, then I turn the entire thing, do these horizontal surfaces, flip it over. So it's basically 6 sides. Well, this guy's ready to ship out, but before it does, there's something we ought to do.